She was just really passionate and emotional. And that's the sucky thing about reality TV. If you're passionate and emotional and you speak your mind,
run with it.
You are absolutely Scarlet Witch letter on your chest. Like, they will do something with your character because you are the exact personality that's so easy to edit, compress, put together, and throw out for the wolves to feed on. Hi everyone, I'm Julie, she's Kelly, and we're here to find love. We're back again this week for another Bachelor recap. Today we're recapping episode 4 and 5 of Joey's season of The Bachelor. For those of you who don't know us, we're two dating coaches who analyze the relationship psychology and dating themes in reality TV shows, especially The Bachelor. So if you're into this kind of stuff, hit the subscribe button to follow along and join the conversation. You can also listen to us on podcast form on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Okay, so we have 2 super juicy episodes to get into. I mean, sometimes I feel like they do these teenage features and, nothing really happens, but I did actually feel like there was so much to get into in both episodes. First with the Maria and Sydney 2-on-1 in the first episode, and then the whole kind of Lea heel turn villain swerve in the second episode. So we have a lot to talk about. Let's start on the Maria and Sydney of it all, though, because that was such a big focal point of this whole week, and it kind of finally came to an end in this episode. They went on the 2-on-1 and Joey decided to send Sydney home and keep Maria. But it was a very dramatic episode. I mean, the kinds of things that we were seeing from Sydney in this episode were pretty shocking.
Sydney was, wow, she is a very unaware person. It's kind of shocking to see someone on TV like her move in the world and not really understand her emotions and blame it on other people. The 2-on-1 date, I was waiting to see her wanting to incite some kind of connection with Joey, and it was a little bit more of comparison or like the concept of goodness that she felt she had and the concept of badness that she felt like Maria had. And it was very telling when Joey sent her home and she looked at him and she just said a very condescending remark of, "I hope you're conscious of your decision." And it just blew my mind because it showed like you don't have a connection of Joey and you're trying to get by on, if there's a villain in the house, you need to take her out and you need to keep me in because I'm the person bringing this to your attention. This is not about the connection I have with you. It's about what I'm doing for you. And that just speaks a lot about the superficiality that she had in her relationship with Joey. It's strange that she valued that so much. There's a lot of unhealthy behaviors that she was exhibiting this episode. And I was really hoping for some kind of arc or apology that she would extend to Maria, or even some love that she would give to Joey and just being like, "I really wish you well on your journey and I'm so happy that I met you." What happened was a lot of patronizing, a lot of condescension, and a lot of judgment that she continued to feed into that dynamic despite her having a chance to do something different in this interaction.
It was honestly shocking to me the way that she went into this date.
This has been really tough for me.
Yeah.
This whole week, to be honest, I went into it really scared.
I want to say I'm sorry that this has been uncomfortable for you.
It was like, woe is me. It's not fair that I'm being put through this. Her focus was so much on herself and her own experience and Maria as the cause of that experience. And you're right, she didn't focus at all on Joey. And granted, she did say this. She was like, I'm so afraid of Maria that I can't focus on anything else. And the way she phrases that is like, again, it's like, it almost feels like disconnected from reality in a way that was disturbing, frankly. And the fact that she seemed to be really feeling some kinds of emotions, right? She was actually tearing up. She was actually getting emotional about it all. All of it really, to me, I felt myself feeling so disturbed watching her and so almost like concerned about her. I was like, what is going on that is making you perceive this situation to the extremity that you are perceiving it? And what is going on that is making you see Maria as the nexus of all of these issues? And granted, I have a few things to say about Maria later on in terms of how Maria has handled all of this stuff, because I also don't think it's great. I really do think that Maria is doing a few things that are really just adding fuel to the fire, making it worse. Maria has had a few moments that I have found to be unkind throughout this. However, the extent to which Sydney is pushing it, which is, I'm afraid that Maria is going to attack me at any given moment, and anything that Maria says, Sydney's like, I can't say anything because you're going to verbally assault me. It's like, it really does, you're right, put Sydney in a certain position, good guy, and Maria in a certain position, bad guy. The thing that really stuck out to me about this, I mean, we talked so much about the weaponization of therapy speak last week. We talked a lot about that and how Sydney is using this type of language to essentially control the situation and like elevate herself. Like, we talked a lot about that. But in this episode, what was starting to stick out to me is the way I think therapy maybe has failed Sydney. And, you know, again, I don't know anything about Sydney's mental health. I don't know anything about Sydney's actual history of therapy, if she's been to therapy, what she knows about therapy. I don't know too much. And so some of this is just, you know, my interpretation of the situation. However, some of the things that she was saying, such as, you know, my body is starting to take a toll from all the anxiety. Like, Maria is the problem. She's affecting my health. The way she was kind of phrasing all of these challenges, it was very much this like externalization of all of the issues and her putting herself as the victim in all of this. She is always the victim in this situation. And, you know, one of the critiques of mainstream therapy that I've been thinking a lot about lately is the way in which sometimes therapy can be very focused on making you feel affirmed and validated unconditionally, which of course is a good thing, right? You know, we all want to be affirmed and validated, right? This is like a good thing, and we want that. Yeah. And also, sometimes this can kind of amount to a bit of like ego stroking, wherein it's kind of like, I'm feeling this really big, hard feeling. I'm hurt, but I love myself. I'm taking care of myself. That means the other people who are causing me to have these feelings, they are the problem, because I love myself unconditionally exactly the way I am. You know, my feelings are valid, and therefore I am never the problem. It is always the other people. It's kind of this, there's no accountability, no true looking inward to see your own contributions to those issues in the places where maybe you're being triggered by someone else's behavior, but it's not like that is their fault, right? Just because you are getting triggered, just because you are feeling something in response to someone else's actions does not mean that that person is toxic. Doesn't mean that that person is a bad person. You can get triggered by someone doing something that's totally normal. An example of this that I always think of, like in relationships, is, you know, people can get really triggered by their partner not texting them back fast enough. That doesn't mean it's bad that their partner is texting them back slowly, but it does mean that there is a very real reaction that you are dealing with, which is, I am triggered, I'm hurt, I feel rejected, I feel whatever I feel in response to this action by my partner. The partner is not doing anything wrong. It has to do with you, how you respond to things, your past wounds, your fears, your attachment style. And what Sydney is doing is her feelings are her only focus. She's focused on how bad she feels, and Maria is the one causing those feelings. She is the problem. She needs to go. And so what I really think about in this situation is, I almost wonder if Sydney has been having this like therapy experience where she's very focused on validating herself and not doing enough to understand the way the wounds that she has and the way those wounds can get triggered in certain situations that cause her to feel big feelings that are not actually other people's fault, but her own fault. It's like an externalization of responsibility, right? And so in a way, it almost just like made me feel bad for Sydney. It made me feel like she has done all this work on herself, which she has kind of talked about in the episode and also on social media. It sounds like she's done all of this work, but there are clearly shortcomings in the way in which she has engaged with therapy. And I don't know if it's totally her fault as much as it is the way in which some therapy can be administered in a way that is so self-focused and not enough. It's so much focused on that protect your peace part of it and not enough focused on, well, there's limits to that, right? Yes, you've got to protect your peace, but also like you can't just push away the people who challenge you, right? You can't just push away the things that are triggering you, because you got to figure out where those triggers are coming from and work on healing those. There's a part of it that you have to deal with, and Sydney is doing none of that. It is all Maria and nothing of her own.
That's such a great point about therapy, because, you know, when mental health wasn't considered as big, it's very accepted now. I think it's very normal to say I'm going to therapy, and it's considered a good sign. It's not stigmatized. But with that, there is an oversaturation of a lot of different people who can create therapeutic spaces where there is a false sense of empowerment, or like in terms of how we have seen this in the situation with Sydney, if this is what's happening in her specific personal experience. Their therapists are not meant to just cater, accommodate, and affirm you completely at cost of like understanding what's happening in reality. The best kind of therapy is a kind of therapy where there is this expansion and this desire to look at things in many different perspectives and to consider lots of other things to be true. That is probably the best skill set you can receive in therapy when you have something that happens to you. It's like, have you considered this? Have you considered that? What if they're feeling this? All of that creates so much empathy to frame your situation, because an experience you have 2 years ago, you can look at it differently throughout the rest of your life forever. You might hate it one year, the next year you accept it, the other year you feel all of these feelings about it. That is the natural evolution of our feelings and the way that we prescribe meaning to anything. Right now, Sydney is, it seems a little bit younger in her journey. And once again, don't know her, just talking about this particular, what we're just experiencing as we're watching the show. But this kind of therapy, it's a little bit fragile, a little bit of you've experienced this thing, now your body is shutting down. When this is happening, remove yourself from this situation, cut them off, have this boundary, do this thing. It's extremely black and white, and that's also a really big cognitive distortion that you unpack in therapy, especially a CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, where you like understand that things have nuance and things live in gray and things thrive in gray spaces. Right now, she's kind of interacting with the world as if she is fragile and she is a victim. And Maria, on this date, oh my God, now I can't be myself because I have this person that is causing me harm verbally and I don't feel safe to be around her. She's not a safe person for me to be around. And that is something I wish she took more accountability with, because now in 2024, because therapy is so celebrated, when you say things like that about somebody, people would take it seriously. If you say this person is not safe, this person is assaulting me, this person is unkind, this person is creating a condition in the house that makes it hard for people to live in, that is threatening language. And I don't even know if Sydney knows that she's doing that, because she's using it as a self-protection mechanism. All of these words that she's weaving together, it's extremely, it really paints Maria as a dangerous person. But by her doing it, paradoxically, it creates Sydney as a person that's perpetuating all of this really harmful, one-dimensional thinking about therapy that is not, it's not good to feed this into the world. Like, it's when people are, if you feel triggered by somebody, and triggered meaning like they make you feel a certain way, I believe there's a little bit of what is my boundary, my personal boundary, instead of, because boundaries are not, Joey, get this person out, because that's control and coercion. The boundary is, I'm just not going to interact with her, and I'm not going to talk about her, and I'm just going to live my life and wish her well. That was not what she did. So there's just a lot of her strong arming herself in this situation that I just totally don't understand. She's a very confusing person to me.
Yeah, I mean, you say it really well. Like, the thing about triggers, and, you know, Sydney did not use the word trigger, but that's what I would describe is, I actually think that the feelings that Sydney is describing, I think there's truth to them, right? I think she is actually feeling unsafe, or like she can't be herself, and like just like on edge in the house with the situation with Maria. And does that mean that Maria is a verbally abusive bully?
No.
But maybe there is something that Maria is doing that is triggering Sydney. And maybe Sydney needs to figure out what that is. Why am I feeling this way? What do I need to do for myself to feel safer? What do I need to do for myself to understand why I'm having such a big reaction to this, and separate like my reaction from what Maria is doing and what Maria's actions are, because there is a difference, right? And, I go back to that texting example because it's the one that I think a lot of people, understand or relate to. A lot of people have that kind of reaction of like, or like know people who have that reaction of my partner is texting me back so slow. I get really anxious, I get worried, and like I just wish he would text me back faster so I don't like panic about like if he's whatever, doesn't love me anymore or whatever it is like, people feel about that. I go back to that example all the time because it's such a good example of like that feeling that you have is real, right? You are feeling this anxiety, you are feeling this like stress, this worry that comes from your partner not texting you back fast enough. And your feeling is valid. It is important to understand that, but it's also important to understand that just because you're having that feeling, it doesn't mean that your partner is doing something to aggress you. He's not causing harm to you or intentionally causing harm to you, and he's not like this person who is digitally abusing you by texting slowly or whatever. Like that's not what's happening. You are having a big feeling, but that is not saying something about his actions. And usually what I recommend to people who are dealing with something like this is both people have to like take steps forward, right? Maybe the partner can support you by, just like being a little bit more conscious of texting back quicker because they know that it's something that triggers you. And also you need to do the work of figuring out how can I self-soothe and deal with those emotions that come up for me when my partner does take a long time to text me back, because at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with him not texting me back quickly. There's nothing wrong with him doing that. And I need to be able to deal with my own emotions with that and figure out where they came from. Why am I so triggered in this? And how do I create that sense of security in myself so I don't feel this big of a feeling to something that wasn't actually an attack on me, right? And I think there's a version of that I think Sydney is not doing in this situation. It is 100% you are the problem and 0% let me look within and see why am I reacting this way? And I think that's where Sydney is kind of really falling in this situation. And, again, this is just an interpretation of Sydney's behavior. We don't actually really know what her experiences are with mental health therapy, etc. This is just, I think, a good jumping off point for this conversation. But it was sad to see. My main feeling, honestly, watching this 2-on-1 date was I was disturbed, but I was actually sad for Sydney to see her in such a state of, to your point, self-imposed fragility, right? Like kind of self-imposed like victimhood, and also the way in which that can impact other people, i.e. Maria in this situation, who was kind of painted in this really extreme way through what I would say is nothing that Maria actually did. I have criticisms of some of the things that Maria did, but I do not think it was deserving of the level of reaction and language that Sydney was using. So
everything that you said was so eloquent and well put, because watching the 2-on-1 date, I'm glad that she was sent home just from a mental health perspective of this house is maybe not for you, and that's completely okay. I wouldn't be well suited for a reality dating show. I wouldn't like to be around that kind of environment. And maybe that's not something that where her best self can really thrive. And we're not seeing the fullness of who she is, but it's clear that this house, this experience, and Joey as a partner is not for her. And they never really had a connection outside of her trying to ask him, which I think she basically did, which is another reason why I was like, oof, Sydney, like this is not the way to make a connection to somebody. It's not based on a concept, it's based on a feeling. And that's what Joey said. He said, I can't find the truth because there is so much she said that's happening. So now I have to go with my feeling. With Maria, maybe there is a chance that she's a villain, but Joey has to see it. Joey has to experience it, and he will spend the entire season or how long she stays on the show discovering that, because he needs to see that behavior. But I mean, I think that Maria did handle herself quite well in the 2-on-1
She did.
Day when he asked each of them, why do you like me? Do you want to stay in the house? And
I was surprised, by the way, in that scene. I was like, whoa, you're just going to sit at the table and ask them both in front of each other?
It was really funny. It just felt like a little, like this, it was awkward. And when Sydney went, Sydney had this rehearsed pageant answer about this idea of this connection that her and Joey could have. But Maria, it sounded like she had a relationship with Joey, because she does. This is why, I would have left, but I feel this for you, so I'm staying. If you feel the same way, then keep me. If not, send me home, because I wouldn't want to be with somebody like you. It sounded like they had an actual connection. That sounded like something you would say to your boyfriend if he upset you. This is what's happening. This is my boundary. So even then, you could just feel the realness in his connection to Maria, that despite the drama, of course, he's going to keep her around. I'm not surprised that he sent Sydney home, and it is absolutely for her betterment that she went home.
Honestly, I was kind of impressed and surprised by him in the scene when he even said that, like, I'm going to stop trying to figure out the truth because I don't think I'm going to be able to. That was actually really surprising. Like, not a lot of leads or people are willing to accept, like, I will not be able to figure out the truth of the situation. There's just too many, variables. It's like too much. I was not there for this interaction, so I have to just go off of, like, my gut. That's something that I am always really bad at. I'm always like, I need to know the truth. What is the truth? But Joey was so willing to just say, like, I accept that I cannot figure it out, and now I'm just going to go based off of who do I feel connected with. And you're right, not surprised that it's Maria. And even the way Maria answered that question, her brutal honesty, she wasn't just like, of course, Joey, I want to be with you. Like, I see it with us. Like, we're, whatever the stuff that Sydney was saying. Maria was like, you know what? Like, I've felt really good about our relationship. I have felt really good before. Now I'm, like, kind of irritated with all of this that's going on. So I'm frustrated and have questions. But if you see it, then I'm down to keep, figuring this out. Dude, what an honest answer. That is an answer that to me instills trust, because Maria is not just feeding Joey what he wants to hear. Maria is being really straight up about, like, I'm, like, frustrated with all of this stuff. I'm, like, not just gonna, like, feed you berries and just be like, of course I want to be with you. I'm angry and I want to talk about that and figure out like what has happened here in our relationship and how do we move on. And I'm not going to just say, hell yes, I'm ready for this. To me, if I'm Joey, that automatically gains trust, because I know that Maria is willing to be actually straight up with me about how she's feeling, in comparison to Sydney, who gave like a boilerplate answer, which would just make me feel like I still don't know anything about Sydney. I don't know how to trust you because you're not saying anything real. I haven't actually broken the barrier into who actually are you. Maria, we know who she is, and I think that answer probably said a lot to Joey. So I thought Maria did such a good job, and Joey also did a really good job in the situation.
I really love how Joey said, I'm going off of my gut. I trust my gut, because it is extremely intelligent. People can tell you all of these things, but what you believe in, what you feel like you need to pursue in that moment is just as valid as any other action you can take. So he said, I am done figuring this out. Let's just give someone the rose and I'm just going to move forward. And if Maria ends up being what, Sydney is saying that she is, I will have to witness that with my own eyes versus all of this noise. And it seems like Joey's going to continue to go down that track because of the way the episodes have progressed.
I don't know. I kind of love Maria. For all of the critiques I have of her, I kind of love her. There's something about her that is so endearing. And like I said, like trustworthy. Something about like how much she is herself does actually make me trust her, even though I have a lot of critiques about like the way that she is showing up in these situations. And I still am very interested in the relationship that she has with Joey. However, I do think in these 2 episodes there have been other people who are starting to like come forward as new frontrunners. So whether or not she'll make it all the way is a different story, but I like the girl a lot.
What did you think about the Maria-Sydney whole situation? How do you feel like Sydney is adding anything to the conversation around mental health? Let us know in the comments down below. And by the way, guys, we have an Instagram, so come find us on there. We're posting a lot of quick takes, behind the scenes, filming after-hour thoughts on the latest Bachelor Nation relationship news. So please come find us.
Speaking of mental health, it's worth noting that Sydney is getting a ton of hate, kind of like death messages in her DMs right now. She has posted about it. You know, we all have critiques of Sydney's behavior on the show, but it's just always worth noting there is always a difference between the person you're seeing on the screen. That person is a character whose storyline is crafted for us by production. We don't know the real Sydney. We don't know her. You don't know her. And we all got to be really careful about the way that we are talking about real life people on the internet. Please do not go to Sydney's inbox and share hate. Really don't share hate anywhere on the internet. We can talk about this and learn from it. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. We can call people in without dragging them through the mud. So keep it in mind with the comments. Okay, so moving on from Maria and Sydney, we are going to get into the whole Lea of it all and the now new feud between Lea and Maria and Jess and Madina. There's a lot of that to get into from the second episode of the week. But first, we want to quickly talk about there have been a lot in both episodes of girls who are starting to emerge as having pretty good, strong connections with Joey. The main girl who I'm like, oh my gosh, he is in love with is Kelsey A, who he had a date with in Spain, I think. The girl with the like incredible hair. She's like the most beautiful person I've ever seen in my life. And they had the most romantic date in Spain. He just seems so in love with her. Actually, shockingly to me, he seems more in love with her than Daisy right now. And I've long thought Daisy to be like the front runner of this whole situation. He also had one-on-one dates with a few other girls. Rachel, Lexi, even Kelsey T has been getting a lot of screen time with him as well. And Jenn. A lot of girls, I feel like their relationships are really progressing. Is anyone sticking out to you, Julie?
Really loved Rachel. Awesome, amazing, supernatural chemistry. Her presence is so calm and sweet. I would say it's almost like a mirror dynamic to Joey. They just have something that feels completely loving and sweet and nurturing to be in. I kind of love, like, even in their conversation, which is usually the conversation where it's like, tell me about your traumas. She was like, let me talk about my career in nursing.
Yeah, I loved that too. I was like, yes, Rachel, tell us about it. I want to know.
It even seems like the way that she opens up about things that matter to her is very similar to Joey. There has to be a little bit more of this built-in foundation because Joey hasn't revealed a lot either. I think he's been a lot more holding space and really showing his capacity to be there for somebody, but he's not like, this happened to me and this means that this is me. Rachel has a very similar energy, so I think she's my front runner. She's a person that I am really, really hoping he chooses just because of how I just love the two of them together.
He actually seems the most himself with Rachel and also Jenn. And I'm not just saying it because I have a personal bias for these two, but very different from the rapport that he has with some of the other girls that are frontrunners, such as Daisy and Kelsey A. It feels like with Rachel on their date, they just had this kind of back and forth that I hadn't actually really seen from Joey yet. I feel like in general in this episode, he was like really kind of coming through with some like jokes and playfulness. Like some of that was coming out from his personality, but I felt like it was most present in his connection with Rachel beyond everyone else.
And I love the other girls that you called out because I saw it this episode too. It's very clear. If you have a connection to Joey, you know at this point. If you don't, then there's probably a little bit of, it's a conversation that is kind of rooted in like the weather, what's happening, or, you know, I'm so happy that you're here, or it's a little bit more of them still exchanging personal information. I can see which connections are really deepening.
The other person that I wanted to briefly touch on is Lexi, who had her one-on-one date, I think in Malta, on the first night. And the thing that I wanted to talk about with her is just her story and, you know, testimony about her life living with endometriosis. It was so powerful to hear her opening up about this. And I think it's so important to have more conversations about endometriosis and pelvic pain, pelvic challenges. I feel like we don't talk about this nearly enough, but I think I read that it's like 1 in 10 women have endometriosis. And it's kind of shocking that it's that common and yet so underrepresented in conversation about, you know, whatever, reproductive health, sexuality, and fertility. I feel like there's not enough conversation about this. And I really appreciated Lexi being willing to share her story, because it's not easy to, share with the world that you are struggling with, one, this chronic condition, but two, infertility. Briefly, if you don't know what endometriosis is, it's a condition where your tissue that's similar to what's in the uterus is growing outside of the uterus. Usually it's in your stomach cavity, kind of around your ovaries and fallopian tubes. But Lexi was talking about, it was found on her lungs, which is so scary. And many people with endometriosis deal with chronic pain, in their stomach and pelvic region. And basically they just deal with this horrible pain daily, and it just kind of comes and goes, but it's chronic pain, right? And it can appear in the form of pain during sex, or really painful periods, or really, really bad period cramps. And given that it's so common, I just wish people would talk more about it, so people would recognize that this pain, this is not just what it's like to have a uterus. It's not just supposed to be this painful. There is endometriosis is something that, even though it is a chronic condition, you do have to, it can kind of flare up and go away, but it is kind of not a lifelong, but it is a long-term condition that people deal with. There are ways to treat and manage some of those symptoms and some of those conditions. Lexi talked about having some kind of surgery to remove some of that tissue that was in the wrong places. And I'm just really happy that more people are beginning to share their experiences with endometriosis online these days. But I remember just 10 years ago or something, women and folks with uteruses, they would just be suffering in silence. They would go to their doctors, talk about their pain, look for help, and the doctors would not take their pain seriously, not be able to diagnose them, and people would go for years without having a diagnosis for their endometriosis, despite how common it is. So anyways, I find it so commendable that Lexi was talking about this, willing to open up on a public stage. It's so important for people to have knowledge of this condition specifically, and just be able to identify what's happening to them and, get treatment, because this isn't, when it's something this common, I'm just so frustrated by the lack of information about it. And of course it's a women's health condition that no one is talking about, a very common form of pain that women deal with that no one is talking about. And so I was just so appreciative to have this conversation on our television.
It was so important to have it on television, because what Lexi spoke about so much was the fact that she went to multiple doctors after years of agony and pain, and they couldn't tell her what was wrong with her. That's awful that Lexi went that many years believing that her pain wasn't as bad as it actually was, because no one was validating her in the medical field. So then she was feeling is something wrong with me? Is it not as bad as I think it is? And that's something that so many endo sufferers talk about, having to go through the medical industrial complex and have so many people tell you it's all in your head, or there's nothing, we're doing all of these other tests, and this is completely maybe it's not as bad as you think, just take some regular blah, 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 whatever prescriptions they give. So her having this conversation on the national stage was very, very important, because The Bachelor really targets such a mainstream audience. And then even Joey's response, I was telling Kelly this before we started filming, it's not I can even praise Joey that much, because I hope how he responds is how people need to respond to this conversation. He said that he's never talked about this fertility with his past partners because he's never had enough serious relationships to have those kind of conversations. And now that he's having it, there is no part of him that wants to judge Lexi for her medical condition or run away from her, because she's so much more than endo. And that is that's it, bottom line. If you really love a person that has endo, you would do whatever it takes to have whatever kind of life and family you want with them. There's so many pathways that you can take. It just requires patience and working with your partner. Joey didn't say anything that is worth this. It's literally him saying something that is absolutely the right kind thing to say. What else can you say in that situation? It's if Lexi is your person, then Lexi is your person, and you're going to make it work.
Right, absolutely. It's so sad that we even have to have this piece of the conversation of women dealing with this chronic pain and then having to deal with their partners abandoning them because of this condition that they have no control over. You can't control that this is, what is happening to your body, and the fact that people, will choose to peace out because they can't handle it. I hear often from people with endometriosis, which is, like I said, associated with so many different kinds of pain, one of which is pain during sex. This can be like a big issue in dating, that a lot of, in heterosexual relationships between men and women, a lot of men can have issues with this, and it can be a real pain point in a lot of relationships for people with endometriosis and other kinds of pelvic pain. So yeah, it was great to see Joey respond in such a positive way. But you're right, I'm just like, this should be the norm. Like, this should be how people with endometriosis are received. And It's sad that that is not the norm. It really isn't, clearly, from Lexi's experience. And we should honestly leave some links. I've read so many stories about what it's like to not only live with endometriosis, but date with endometriosis. And I'm sure Lexi will be someone who will be willing to share more of her story. I'm excited to hear more from her. But we should leave some links down below, because I've read so many things about this, and it's just important to be aware and to be, open and loving to people who just have these different ways in which they are existing in the world. And, it is so sad, of course, that Lexi is dealing with infertility, and that is a common side effect or thing that comes with endometriosis, is that it can cause fertility challenges. It doesn't always lead, the way Lexi has described it, it sounds like there's some chance that she may not be able to have kids at all. That isn't always the case. People with endometriosis can sometimes have kids. It's just harder. But, it's just, infertility is such an emotional issue. And, to your point, there's so many pathways to pregnancy too that can be explored. And I'm glad that Joey responded with thoughtfulness that he did. And also, this should be the norm. This should be the norm.
Exactly. That's why it's so hard Joey's such an amazing bachelor. The way that he handled that conversation was so great, but it doesn't deserve praise, because that means that someone responding like that is like, wow, look at you, what a hero, you're willing to do that for your partner. No, that's just something that you should do if you love your partner,
right?
Really, exactly. That's just the bottom line.
So let us know what you all thought about Lexi and Joey's date. What did you think about Lexi opening up about her endometriosis? Does anyone have anything they want to share about what they know or their experiences with endometriosis? Please share down below any information, because it's just good for us to be having these conversations. It's so important. We'll try to leave some links too in the description as well if you want to learn more about this. But I love a moment for education.
By the way, if you watch this point in the video and you're not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. We do this every single week. We recap all of the episodes of The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, and so on. So please subscribe and follow along. Guys, it's very disappointing, but Lea, one of our favorites, went from hero to villain so fast. It's so clear that she sees this show as a competition. It's so clear that she's 23. And I really feel strongly that for The Bachelor, there should be a cutoff period. I think 25 and up. It's so clear that she's just so young to be on the show the way that she's acting. It's hard for me to even critique Lea the way that I would critique other people, because she's so young. If I was 23, I was totally a jerk when I was in my early 20s, because I didn't know any better. I was just moving in the world with all of my feelings, trying to have it make sense, seeing myself as the protagonist, as the main character who could do no wrong. And Lea is coming at it from that place. Her conversation she had with Madina, where she was saying, I thought you were friends with Sydney. Why are you not being nice to Maria? I was just like, I can't even take what Lea's doing seriously, because it felt like a conversation I would have with my friends in middle school about, why are you talking to her because I had a crush on, it felt so similar to that. Yeah, what do you think about Lea?
So many mixed feelings and emotions watching this, because obviously I've been such a big fan of Lea from the beginning, and this was a really disappointing heel turn. I think my interpretation of the situation, let me say that again. I think my interpretation of the situation is a little different from yours. I actually, I mean, I do think jealousy is involved, but I actually don't read Lea necessarily as being primarily driven by jealousy in this situation, or even primarily driven by immaturity. I think there is immaturity in what she's doing. However, to me, the way I read this situation is, I feel like Lea, she obviously became friends with Sydney in the house. We saw that even prior to this week, even last week, when the Sydney, Maria, Madina thing like first started up, we saw Lea kind of talking to Sydney about the situation and kind of being like a confidant for Sydney in that situation. I was already like, what are you doing, Lea? Why are you buddying up with Sydney? But the thing about that is, it's interesting because the reaction that I think we all had to watching Lea criticize Madina for being friendly with Maria is also the same reaction that a lot of people had to watching Lea be friendly with Sydney, right? I think a lot of people were like, Lea, why are you, being buddy-buddy with Sydney, who's being, awful in the house? Why are you, like, we all like you, we want to root for you, but if you're being friends with Sydney, then it's going to change how we think about you. And that's what Lea was doing to Madina, right? Lea was like, well, Madina, I thought we were all in the same like party, the same allyship, but now you're being friends with the other side. That's changing how I see you. So it's like, it's hard for me to say how to feel about this, because actually I think everyone literally did the exact same thing to Lea. I think everyone got really mad at Lea for being friends with Sydney, and then Lea got mad at Madina for being friends with Maria. And so it's hard for me to exactly condemn Lea for this. Granted, I think her approach in the conversation was very judgmental. It very much like it was the way she talked to Madina. She clearly, to your point, really thought she was right. She even walked away from the conversation being like, Madina just doesn't get it. Even though I think Madina described her position very well. Madina was very much just like, I think we have a different point of view of how to handle situations like this. I don't know how you handle situations. I don't know why you're doing the things that you do. And you don't need to know why I do the things that I do. And that's okay. We can just disagree and, also accept each other. Very mature for Madina versus Lea, who was coming from the position of, I have what I think is the right way to behave, and I think everyone should be doing the same thing as I am. And that's the part of it that I think it is immature. However, the asterisk that I put on it is, it's an immaturity that I think a lot of us have. Literally last week, our last recap, I mentioned that like it icks me out to watch people be really friendly with the villains. I do get icked out by that. That is something, there is a judgment that I have for people, watching people be friendly with people that I look poorly on. So I think there is an immaturity to that, but I do think it is common. And I don't think that's just Lea who is that way. The problem with Lea is that the target of her judgment is Maria, someone who we all love and someone who we kind of know didn't start all of this. And so to me, the way I read this situation, it's almost like Lea, her real sin was judging this whole situation wrong and picking the wrong side. She picked Sydney's side, and the internet America picked Maria's side. And what Lea is doing actually doesn't feel that dissimilar to me as what the rest of us did and what the rest of us do while watching this show. It doesn't actually feel that dissimilar to me. But the problem is that Lea, she didn't understand. She didn't have the full context of the situation. She judged the situation wrong. She picked the wrong side. And she's acting the same way as I think. The thing I kept thinking during the episode was all of the weird stuff or mean stuff that she's saying about Maria, calling her a dramatic crybaby, saying like, oh God, it's so annoying to be on dates with Maria. I kept thinking like it was like so annoying hearing her say that. But if she had been saying that about Sydney, people would be applauding her. People would be like, yeah, Lea, speak the truth. Mm-hmm. Sydney is a dramatic crybaby. That's how people would react if Lea had been saying that stuff about Sydney. But she's saying it about Maria, who everyone loves. And so to me, I don't know if it's about what Lea did as much as it is about her judgment of the situation and who she chose to side with. So do I condone Lea's actions? No, I think she was mean and was like really like harassing Maria, and she was just like, doing way too much and just like making Maria into a much bigger problem than she needed to be. However, I'm struggling to fully criticize Lea because I do think there is similarities to what Lea is doing to what the rest of America, like how the rest of America like interprets what's going on in the situation. I think people are mad at Lea for the things that they themselves are also doing. This is not a defense of Lea. I was really frustrated with her, but I do think it's sticky in a way.
The reason why I can't give her so much, like, yes, like you judge the situation wrong, I'm going to continue to chalk it up to her immaturity, because it is. Like, if you're in a situation where there's all of these things happening, it's totally right to take your friend's side. Maybe it's emotional immaturity. There's something about just taking your friend's side and not really being like, what is actually happening, and let me understand the situation. I think that's incredibly immature. Like, if Sydney's like, I'm getting hurt, all of this stuff is happening, yes, I'm just totally I'm gonna listen to you, I'm gonna back you. I'm not only gonna back you, but I'm gonna talk smack about anybody that's involved in this situation, instead of doing, I believe, like, the more elegant way of handling this, which is just, hey, what's going on? I'm not gossiping. I'm wanting to put the pieces together to understand what I'm fully putting my energy around. That's not what happened with the situation. Instead, she just completely decided to ride hard for Sydney, which I get as a friend. But the difference between America and Medina is that we are seeing the situation as what it is. Lea is getting painted as a villain because she is saying things to the producers, and they're now splicing together a narrative. We don't see that with Maria, because Maria is smart enough to know that she's on camera, and she's not going to talk about people negatively, especially when there's drama percolating around the scenes. She's like, I'm not going to feed this narrative because it will continue to have all of these spliced, frankenbited edits of me getting together. Lea really held strong in her very limited perspective that she's right, which is, once again, another sign of immaturity to me, to just believe that I am right because my friend said it, because she said the right words, because other people backed me. Now I get to make people cry, like Madina, because now Madina is talking, like that. It crossed the line to me.
I totally agree with what you're saying. She did just kind of take Sydney's side, but I'm thinking about it from the beginning. We talked about this in our recap last week of like, I bet it's confusing to be in the house. You don't have you don't see all the footage. Some girl comes to you and said, I just heard Maria shit-talking Madina. Your instinct is not going to be like, I think this girl is lying to me. Like, why would you randomly assume that girl is lying to you? You're just like, oh, really? And so then, so Lea is just kind of taking the information that's been given to her. And so she's just like, wait, that really happened? Maria was shit-talking Madina? And
good point.
Then we'll get into Maria, who is throwing fuel on the fire by firing off on all cylinders and like coming in real hot in these conversations. Maria kind of gives people things to grip onto in terms of reasons to critique her. And so I'm thinking about it from Lea's perspective and talking about that therapy speak thing. Sydney, again, she talks in this way that really is convincing. It kind of makes you think like, if you're in the situation, you're not seeing the full perspective. You didn't see where it all started, but Sydney comes to you and says, I heard Maria shit-talking Madina, and it seems like she's just like running her mouth and invalidating Madina's feelings. I kind of feel like, Maria just like is like making Madina feel like what she's saying doesn't make sense or whatever, she's like saying all of these things, really trying to like validate Madina's feelings. Lea, who to me reads as a pretty, thoughtful, kind person in the sense that she kind of has like maybe a similar way of talking about and looking at situations. She's hearing the right kind of language coming out from Sydney. And so she's like, oh, Sydney's kind of like me. We are trying to like exercise kindness and grace in everything we do. And Sydney has identified Maria as someone who's not doing that. Sydney seems like me. I've seen Maria do awful things. And so, okay, I guess I agree with Sydney. So it's not just like my friend said this. It's kind of like this information made sense in the house. So Lea is missing information that America has. That's definitely true. But I think it's really hard for me to fault her. The things I fault her for is then going on to be like, I'm happy Maria is crying. And it's like, all right, Lea, sit down. Like,
it didn't make it better. Yeah.
Come on, Lea. Like, please stop. But her feeling as strongly as she did that Maria sucked. I can't fault her for it because, again, if Lea felt that strongly about someone who actually did suck, I think we would have a really different reaction. Like, I think of, I don't know, that season with Shanae, where Shanae was the villain. Like, I think a lot of girls were like, oh my God, Shanae is like just running her mouth. And like people had a lot of bad things to say about Shanae, but no one was like, they're mean. They were like, you're right, Shanae does suck. And so it's great that these girls are calling out Shanae. But because Lea picked the wrong target, she misjudged the situation. She had the wrong information. She picked the wrong person to kind of blab about on camera. It's like, yeah, I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like she kind of got
I totally
misguided by Sydney. And I feel...
She did.
And then she went out of line and she started like just like randomly shit-talking Maria for no reason. And that was out of line. But I do kind of like... Part of me is like, I don't fully... fault her. Like, I'm so upset with her, but I don't like fully fault her for not having the full information, if that makes sense, because I bet it is confusing in the house. Does that make...
Because you see the humanness of what's happening, and that's what we're always applying to these characters, because there is no one needs to condemn anyone on the show for doing the show, because it's a TV show. And I'm just... The one thing that Lea could have been a little bit more thoughtful about, that I do feel strongly about, is if she really had a connection to Joey, maybe just don't focus on this stuff so hard. That's probably her fatal flaw in this whole situation is, yes, you can totally take sides. Yes, you can totally have opinions about people. But if that is overriding all of the conversations you're having in your interviews with your friends, with the other contestants in the house, with the producers, maybe your conversation what your whole journey is about is off track, and that was probably something that Lea could feel. I do believe there was a little bit of jealousy towards Maria in terms of, I don't like this person, my friends don't like her, and it's so clear that Maria is such a front runner for Joey, whereas Lea does have a connection. It's nowhere as strong. I would say it's quite mid. Like, with the whole pack, she's right in the middle. It's not a bad place to be, but it's not the strongest place to be. It's not clear of Maria, where he's like sending people home because of Maria. So I totally get your Lea defense. And for me...
It's not a defense. Not exactly.
Yeah,
a little bit.
not a defense.
It's a little tiny.
It's a little... I mean, I get what you're saying, because you're totally right. She just chose the wrong person and she's getting attacked. But it's like, Lea, just don't stop talking to the producers. Stop talking to people about it. It's so bad, because now it's like... She is going to have... I don't see her lasting for many more episodes.
I will say, like, Maria, bless her, she's getting a great edit. I don't actually think that she said nothing wrong. I actually fully believe that she has said shit to the camera that just wasn't included, because the producers are crafting a great story for her, which is fine, because I like Maria a lot, but maybe I like her because I haven't seen all the horrible things she's done. I don't know. Because Maria actually owned the fact that she called Sydney dumb and embarrassing. Maria said that. She said it to Sydney. She's like, I own that I said that about you. And we never actually saw that on camera in the original pool party episode. We never heard Maria use the word dumb. But the fact that she said to Sydney, yes, I said that, tells us that Maria has said things that we haven't seen. Again, not a defense of Lea. Because the truth is, I was really disappointed in Lea. I really was so disappointed by her behavior throughout these 2 episodes. Part of, I think, why I am confused by her is probably because I relate to her. I think I relate to her because she has these kind of high, like, these values that she's really holding so tightly. And this is something that I do too. I hold my values so tightly that sometimes it causes me to not accept or be kind to other people, because I'm so staunch on my own values, and it's something that I am always trying to work on. And I see it in Lea too, that she has these things that she really believes in that I think at heart are actually good. Like, stand up for your friends, stand up to the bully in the house. Now, she's wrong. Of course, Maria's not a bully, but she's perceiving Maria in that way. So I think Lea's instincts in this situation are actually aligned with something good, but then she's like taking it out of whack and out of proportion, and like using those values as like bludgeons to like be mean to people. And this is like my great fear in my own life. I'm like, I need to figure out this line of like, how do I hold my values really tightly, and also like if I see other people who aren't behaving in the kindest way, how do I, like, especially if they're people who I care about, how do I pull them in or whatever, like, without being judgmental, which is what it came across with Madina, right? It became like, I'm talking down to you. I have the right ideas and you have the wrong ideas. And that's what it sounded like, even though I don't actually know that was what it had to be. Because I think if Lea is just saying, like, kind of rough, like, I thought you were really good friends with Sydney, and, like, it's kind of weird that you're like being really friendly with someone who is, like, horrible to Sydney. Like, remember, in Lea's head, Maria has been bullying Sydney, and now she's seeing Madina be friends with the bully. Again, because we know Maria isn't a bully, we are perceiving it differently. But in Lea's head, I don't actually think what she was doing was totally, her instincts weren't out of line. It was like she just was taking it too far and couldn't find, maybe this speaks to the immaturity piece of it, couldn't find that line of, like, where do I end and other people begin? How do I, like, I can hold my values really strongly without trying to strong arm people into doing the things that I think are right.
Lea is just very passionate. She's really passionate, and her North Star in this show, which is finding a partner, Joey, it's almost like Sydney, and her emotions and her connection with Sydney has kind of superseded that in this current moment, because she is so emotional that her friend went home, and the sadness is not shared with other people. And it's very clear that this is a very strong value guiding force in her life, which is why she, like, threw that date card in the fireplace. Like, there are so many things that it's showing my values are still here. Right now, I have chosen this person back. I don't know the full situation, and I am so confused on why no one else is feeling this strongly, this passionately about it. And I'm coming in because I want other people to, I want to understand where other people are coming from. Like, Madina, why did this happen? Like, I can definitely see the repair that she was making in that conversation. And Lea is she's just very honest, and I believe there's a little bit of the sweetness in how she's moving in the world of just, I'm saying the things I'm saying, like, look at my hair, look at my nails, I feel so great, I feel so great, and oh my gosh, I don't love going on a date with this person, because she's just being completely open. And it sucks that that's being exploited in the show, because now this person of who she is has now been diminished to this villain, and it's really hard to not see her from a context of, like, oh my gosh, like, are you being immature? Are you being young? Are you unaware that you're on a TV show? Because in reality, she wouldn't get nearly as much hate, frustration, and people looking at her differently. But because she's on a show and they need a villain, now she's just being pushed right to the center. And that really sucks. Like, I do feel bad for her that way. I'm really glad that you called in so much of what is truly happening from, like, a human person context, because right now, like, we're just seeing her as Lea, a contestant on the show, versus Lea and who she is as a person and how she lives her life. And that's why it's really important that as we're talking about these people, we always remember to bring that into the framework, because we're just analyzing this from a pop psychology lens. We are not doing it as indications or arbitrations of who they actually are as people.
Even that scene with her, like, look at my nails, look at my hair, I was like,
I felt bad for her. Yeah.
I was like, if you weren't in the doghouse right now, I would think this was so cute. Everyone would be like, oh my God, Lea is so cute. But because you're in the doghouse with America, this isn't cute. People find you annoying. But if she was still a sweet girl, if she was still the girl that everyone was rooting for, then people would see the scene and be like, oh my God, Lea, look at her, just so into her freaking nails. It's so cute. But because she's in this storyline that's been constructed around her, it's like we are perceiving her in a certain way. And again, I just keep coming back to, like, a lot of the things that she has done are things that we all have done watching the show. Lea was mad at Madina for being friends with Maria. We were mad at Lea for being friends with Sydney. Lea is coming in hot about, like, oh, like, you shouldn't hang out with people who, like, mean people. But literally, we all kind of have that kind of slight little instinct of, like, oh, it's weird when people are buddy-buddy with the villain. We all literally have that thought. And Lea is saying those things out loud. She picked the wrong person to peg as the villain. Her judgment was like wrong. But I kind of think that's her main sin. It's like she like didn't judge the situation correctly. She's doing kind of the same things that like everyone does on the show. Like if she was shit talking Sydney, people would be cheering her on. People would think she was great. Like, but she's shit talking Maria. That was the mistake. And there is a level of, you know, she held her values so firmly. She had this like passion and fervor for her values, which in another situation might be admirable, or if applied in a different way could be admirable. But I think of Madina in that conversation, and the thing that Madina did, which I found to be so mature. Listen, I hear what you're saying. You believe that this is the way friends should behave. My values are different. I think friends don't have to behave in that way. I think there's a different way to, you know, navigate this kind of situation while still honoring my friendship to Sydney. We have different perspectives of this on this, and that's okay. I'm not going to try to convince you to see it my way. Let's agree to disagree. Yeah. Beautiful from Madina, and challenging. Lea was clearly like, oh, she just doesn't get it. Like she just like couldn't internalize that. And like, I thought it was such a good alternative to the thing that Lea was trying to do, which is like, my values are the only values. Everyone needs to have my values. I think the ability to acknowledge other values is so important. Again, something that I am personally always like really trying to like identify the values in the situation and what things that are coming out of my mouth are based on the truth and what are things that are actually just my values. And that's okay. Some things I believe are just coming from my values, and they're not coming from the right thing to do. They're just coming from the right thing to do for me based on my values. Lea couldn't identify that difference. Madina could. And I thought it was very impressive from Madina to handle the situation the way that she did.
Yeah. Mental health therapist, so that makes a lot of sense for Madina to be like. And I love the openness of how you've guided this conversation. It changed my mind about Lea because I am interpreting her through a show context, and I wasn't thinking about as much the values and the passions that she had versus, girl, you're on a TV show. Like, be careful about what you're saying. I know. I was like,
I was like, stop talking.
In real life, totally cool. Exactly. But when you're being filmed 24/7, it's like, keep that to yourself because it's just so easy. Now there's a forever living record of something that she said when she was passionate about something that really mattered to her, and that sucks that she's now being judged this way. I really believe that Lea will find a person that absolutely adores the way that she holds her values, and this season might be a teaching moment for her to see, I feel really strongly about these values, and what does it mean like to have that coexist in a house of all of these conflicting values. It's stacked similarly, but maybe it's not the same priority because everybody has these ladders of it, right? And if hers is like, I am ride or die for the people in my life, but someone else's is, I am going to come at it from a compassionate perspective, that's not going to totally jive, but they mean the same thing. So that is going to be Lea's North Star. Let's see if she unpacks that throughout the season. Yeah. I do feel hopeful that she'll rise above. This is just a sensitive moment. Her friend just went home. So I'm just kind of thinking that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think to your point, it's like, there's like a growth journey ahead for Lea, and which might speak to what you originally were bringing up, which is like, you know, she's 23. Like, I think there's a growth journey probably ahead for her in terms of like figuring out how to, you know, be passionate and really hold your values strongly while also having that level of acceptance for other people and knowing how to interact with people with different values, how to, you know, allow yourself to be challenged, and how to allow your values to be challenged and the way that you move through the world to be challenged. And that is something that I think it can take a long time for people to get comfortable with that. I'm still always getting comfortable with it. Every time I'm challenged, I'm like, help! This is awful! So, you know, I get it. And so I do think there's a growth journey for Lea that, you know, I for some reason, I just like have faith in her, that I do actually think she is at core a good person, and I really kind of have faith that she's gonna find her way there. I'm curious to see what's gonna happen after the final rose, where everyone is gonna watch it back, or everyone has now watched it back, knows kind of more the details of everything that happened. I'm very curious to see how Sydney, Maria, Lea, Madina, all what they have to say about this now that like they can kind of see the story in full picture, as opposed to like in the house when you're just everything's on hearsay and you don't really know what's going on. I'm kind of curious to see how they all approach this.
Totally.
But
imagine all the snippet text they have. Like everybody is just they're gonna be digging in. So I'm excited, but Lea will have a redemptive arc because you've pinpointed exactly what changed in this episode in terms of what we were being revealed from her personality. It's just her values and how she sees that with the person that she really cares about. It wasn't because she was doing it for TV to get a certain edit. She was just really passionate and emotional. And that's the sucky thing about reality TV. If you're passionate and emotional and you speak your mind,
run with it.
You are absolutely Scarlet Witch letter on your chest. Like they will do something with your character because you are the exact personality that's so easy to edit, compress, put together, and throw out for the wolves to feed on. There's something about Lea.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I think Maria really lucked out with her edit. I really, really do, because I think Maria has done some things that haven't been great, and yet her edit is so good.
Her edit's fab.
We saw her sit there and say to Sydney, "All right, Missy Troublemaker, I don't want to hear another peep out of you." This is prior to any of this drama starting. That was one of the first things we heard her say to Sydney, and so. But we all kind of like breezed right by it. I see people on the internet saying like, Maria hasn't said one bad thing about another girl. That's literally not true. We've heard her say some unkind things about some people. We just think it's okay because of the people she said it about. And so it's a really interesting thing how the edit really can affect your perspective of, who's in the right and who's in the wrong.
So guys, we had a very fascinating discussion about Lea, and I am now converted into a Lea stan. Just in terms of, I understand where she's coming from. I understand that as we're watching the show, we don't know these people, and we don't know what's going on with their perspectives and how they're navigating their choices on the show. So let's talk about it in the comments. How do you feel like Lea handled the situation? How do you feel like her sadness about her friends leaving the show and her values created this personality shift in her that we are now all condemning? Let us know in the comments down below. We are really excited to hear your opinions.
Oh my gosh.
Keep it kind, guys.
Scared.
Keep it kind. Let's be nice.
Scared, but I'm excited. By the way, sorry guys, I just moved because my phone died. I had to switch locations.
Location change. Just like a conversation change. We're moving into the Maria conversation, and it's going to be quite quick because there's a lot that we're going to continue to talk about her in the next episode because her storyline is continuing. I will say that Maria is definitely a lightning rod for a lot of conversations. She is inspiring so many conversations and emotions of all of the girls in the house and with America. I think that really Maria, there is something very savvy about her, and I'm talking about it from a show context. She is just super savvy, really bold, really charismatic, very confident. She is making her mark on the show, and I can just really... It is inspiring, I believe, jealousy from the girls, and it's a little bit like, guys, like, don't feed into it because I feel like it's taking away from their connection of Joey, and I wish that was happening a little bit more than such a big focus on the drama. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm noticing of Maria, is that Maria is just instigating so much energy and movement in the house, and it's kind of getting away a little bit from even her relationship with Joey. I can't tell if they're a good match. I just know that he's attracted to her and he really likes her and she likes him, but what is their connection now? Is it just them fighting against the odds and proving the naysayers wrong, or is it because they genuinely feel something? That's kind of been called into question.
Absolutely. I've had that thought too, that even though Joey clearly has a strong connection with Maria and stronger than many of the other women in the house. It is so complicated now by everything that has been going on around Maria that it does make me wonder or question whether the relationship is going to be able to like turn a new page and just get into like focusing on them, because they've had to deal with so much just like criticisms, and it just makes it harder for them to have like a real authentic build to their relationship. But it's not to say that they can't turn the page. The thing that I'll say about Maria is, one, gosh, she's so likable. Like, to your point, she's savvy. Like, she's so likable. But I don't know, is she savvy, or that's just her? Like, sometimes I'm just like, I think she's just shooting it out of her mouth, but it's just because she shoots it out her mouth, she's so trustworthy. And it's that trustworthiness that makes her so likable. And so I don't know, I'm baffled by her, but I really like her a lot. I find myself really rooting for her. I think from what I'm seeing on the internet, I think a lot of people are really rooting for her. I will say that there are some things that Maria has done in this whole situation that haven't been great. Even in these 2 episodes, it did feel like there have been moments that she's just coming in too strong into the conversations. I think of the fight that she had with Jess at the end of this last episode. Maria she had a rose already. She went to get time with Joey during the cocktail party. Jess took such issue with it, even though it was kind of hypocritical for Jess to do that, because Jess literally did something equally as disrespectful on the first night. Just like went in for seconds and thirds on the first night to keep talking to Joey. And she was like, I don't want to be that girl, but can I steal him again? Like, she was doing something that was similarly, a Bachelor faux pas. So, whatever. I don't have too much to say about Jess. I thought that was pretty hypocritical for her. But what I will say about Maria is that in that conversation, Jess comes in. She's like, well, I'm kind of surprised you went in to talk to Joey so early. Maria just comes in hot immediately. She's like, yeah, what's wrong with that? Oh, you have nothing to say? Okay, great. Mm-hmm. And it's like, whew, that was so, like, heated. And I get it. I think Maria has been pushed to the brink at this point. I think she's so fed up with people coming at her that it's like she's starting to just like snap at people. But she's kind of been coming in with that energy literally since the first conversation between her, Sydney, and Madina. She's been very, like, someone will bring something up that she did that upset them, and she's immediately like, well, what is it really? Like, what did I do? Like, really? That's a problem? Like, she comes in with this hot energy that
it's hard.
It doesn't help the situation at all. In fact, it kind of makes it worse. And then she'll, like, throw names out. She calls Sydney Missy troublemaker. In this case with Jess, like, she's like, you have nothing to say, clearly, so we're done here. It's like she, like, shut it down in a way that was really brusque, right? Like, of course, because Jess, like, instigated this whole thing, it's like, maybe Jess deserved it? I don't know. But the thing is, like, I think what people really forget is that I get that we want to speak our minds in these conversations, but you also got to focus on managing the conflict. And Maria is so bad at that. She cannot communicate her thoughts without setting people off and making it worse. And I think there is so much benefit to keeping a cool head and just kind of listening and being open in these kinds of conversations. And Maria, bless her, I don't think she's in the wrong in all of these situations, but then she'll come into the conflict with such harsh energy that I'm not surprised that the girls are like, see, you're a mean girl. And it's so tough. I'm like, Maria, you just need to reel it in, because you're right. In all the situations, you're right. But you got to reel in your tone, because you're just giving them fuel to hate you, you know?
It's just continuing the storyline, and I no longer believe that she's a good match for Joey because of all of the stuff that's happening. I get that the whole incident started from a simple comment that she made about Madina. Now it is showing this pattern of behavior that she isn't able to kind of diminish, quiet down, and reconcile with people in the house and have some kind of repair conversation. She's fanning the flames, and that is telling of somebody's communication and conflict style. It's not a bad or a good, it's just that is how they handle that kind of situation. And once again, it is a very specific, concentrated, manufactured situation, but it is how she is handling it. And that is not something I can see Joey being down with, because even upon watching it back, yes, Maria has been in the right in terms of she has not nearly caused as much severity that everybody in the house is saying she's doing, but she isn't not cooling down either. Yeah. She knows that she is right because she knows how she's acting in the house. And now she's using it as an opportunity to kind of put down other people and to not listen or pay attention or attend to their feelings. She's completely disregarding and dismissing it. And based on what we know about Joey, that is exactly antithetical to the kind of person he's looking for in a relationship. So they're not a good match. We'll see how far she makes it. We'll see if she makes it past the next episode. Now that Lea, who Joey's had a traditionally good relationship with, nothing bad, and he has a little bit more of a connection. But once again, it's not a true connection. It's a connection that happened based on the production of them having to huddle together and make a decision about the date card. Yes. So it's not as if Kelsey or Lexi or Rachel had this conversation to Joey. It's Lea who has a connection, but it's wavy at best. So this is not the right... It's almost like she's not even the right person to deliver that, because it's just not substantial enough for Joey to say, I am going to hook on this and I'm going to make decisive action towards it. I just kind of see Maria kind of getting by with it, and it just depends on how Lea handles the next conversation and how Maria handles it. But they're both very passionate people, and Maria kind of does that thing where she says, you know, like, if you're not going to be with me, then don't be with me. And when it comes down to that choice, he knows I have to send the other person home if I really like Maria.
This thing that Maria does where she's like unable to manage conflict and kind of reel it in and keep things cool and level-headed and, you know, deal with other people's emotions in a mature, level-headed way. Her inability to do that is something that, to me, could be a nail in the coffin for her relationship to Joey, because at the end of the day, some of the outbursts that Maria has had, I don't think Joey would even tolerate it, to be honest. I think if she ever kind of lashed out at him the way she lashes out at Jess and Sydney and other people, I kind of think Joey would be like, listen, like, I know you're having this big feeling, and I'm also scared because I'm sad that I'm the one who hurt you, and I'm like going to blame myself because I'm a people pleaser, but also I don't have relationships where conflict gets this explosive.
Yeah, and exactly.
I think I could see him shutting it down, because it's just like, if Maria can't figure out how to manage her own frustrations, regulate it, and respond gracefully, then, you know, that causes trouble in relationships. It doesn't even matter if you're right. If you can't come into the conversation gracefully, you're going to cause strife, conflict, tension, explosiveness, and that's what's kind of happening with Maria. And I could see Joey really being overall turned off by it. Not because Maria's a bad person or a bully or whatever, but she's really bad at managing conflict. And I think that, you know, hopefully she can work on that, but so far she's been in conflict with like 3 different people, and it's the same every time. And in fact, 4 different people: Madina, Sydney, Jess, Lea. She's in conflict with all these different people. Again, I don't actually think she's doing anything wrong to attract their ire, but she's not managing their feelings well and making it worse. And so, you know, I just I love her to pieces. There is an element of speaking your mind is not an excuse to just be a free-for-all and like just like say whatever you want. You got to figure out how to say that stuff, but in a way that is, you know, people can receive it and actually listen. If you're yelling at someone, they're not listening to you. They're just scared of you yelling, or they're whatever, like getting angry because you're yelling, right? Like, it's as simple as that. Jess was on some BS, but like Maria could have just been like, hey, you know, I thought it was fine for me to go. Exactly what Madina said. I thought it was fine for me to go talk to him. I see that we disagree on that, and I think it's okay that we disagree. agree to disagree. And, you know, I'm sad that it hurt your feelings and I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. And I think we just disagree about that. But I do respect you. Simple. Keep it simple. But she couldn't do it. She had to just like come in hot.
That's the lesson for Maria. Like, let us know in the comments down below what you feel about her whole arc so far. I don't see it happening with her and Joey because of her inability to just be able to handle something with some grace and just know, just because you're right, you don't get to treat people like this.
Oh boy. Okay, so this was a long conversation. If you've watched to the end of this video, drop down below. This week was bananas as part of your comments, so we know who actually listened all the way through, because wow, this was a lot, and I think it was more than we even thought we were going to get into, but there was a lot of drama to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we will be back next week. Make sure you're subscribed. We'll be talking about Joey's season every episode, every week, like we always do, so stay tuned, and we will see you, next week. Bye.